invasive trees, focused on trees that are healthy and native, and restore visuals down to the pond. Phase two will be good this spring, which is to kind of take out the stumps, so those, this would be clear. This is for the trees that live in the stumps. The stumps we take out in phase two when we do more grading and get some of the fine things done. But it's best to take down this many trees in the wintertime when the ground is frozen. And there's less problems with similar, same contractor we've used in the past at the golf course. We have no issues with them. And I think it's going to be a good project to make sure to take lots of before pictures, because I believe it is going to be strikingly different when it's done. And the idea is to open up view sheds of the park and have some green space for people to play in the bottom pavilion and kind of eliminate some of the brush areas where we have a lot of visual issues with some things. So I'm looking forward to it, but it is going to be an impact. You should prepare yourself for some less trees.
Any questions?
Oh, just speaking on behalf of the Vale Park Task Force, we've worked closely together with the city, and we've done a lot of improvements in the park, and especially around the pavilion and the lighting, and this just really helps because we have had some, less than desirable behavior because of the undergrowth and the trees and all of that, and opening up the water features in the park is really going to lend to an improvement, and we're excited about both phases, and it's been a great journey.
Yeah. I think it's going to be great. So this is phase one, phase 2 to 5.
What's your time frame for phase 2? Will it be done by the end of summer?
We're hoping to have phase 2 out, I believe, end of February, beginning of March to bid, so that we can get them out there in the spring.
Okay.
It's not, like I said, it's not like wow work. We're going to be doing some gateway entrances to the Eastern Avenue neighborhood to bring them into the park. We're going to be finishing a path, like creating more of a walk bike trail down the existing one that we have, the Central Park Vale connector. We're going to be doing some grading and clearing and kind of just getting the park into the shape that we'd like it to be. So once again, it's taking back the park, and it's going to be more flexible and have more ability to utilize. And by making that connection to the Eastern Avenue neighborhood, we're also that's fine. I know it's a small component, but we're going to have wayfinding at all the entrances. So when you come in, you are here, here's Eastern, this way Central Park, and you kind of have an idea of where you are, because we don't have that now, so you get a little lost about where you are and where things are. And I think that'll really add a good component to it. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a good use of this grant that we were.
Oh, good job.
And the entrances off Eastern are at Irving, which is where the new project is, with the old St. Mary's School and the new apartments, all in that Eastern Avenue area. So it'll
one block up at the Grant.
Oh, I thought we were at Irving.
Not exactly at St. Mary's,
okay.
Because of what we talked. We wanted to have an entrance at every one of those streets, but we worked with Doc McAvoy in Vale and found that there are active burials in those areas. Yeah. So we're going to focus.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
So we're going to focus on
You're not.
Yeah.
Historical burials.
Okay.
Historical burials. Sorry.
Active is a little.
And I've been working with Lisa and the Vale Park Task Force, and we have a new entranceway designed with sidewalks, and hoping to have the entranceway designed in such a way to limit as best we can ATVs or dirt bikes or things like that. So we're like a little bit of a little jaunt into it, so the pedestrians are welcome. But I think people are going to find it's a nice addition.
Mr. Mann.
In what Councilmember Peraza's point, where there's been less than desirable activity, hopefully all this is going to bring good people in there who want to use the park, have a good time, just enjoy what is a very scenic location. It's also complementary to work that's being done at my side. And so we're just going to continue the growth of the good things happening in the park and displace some of those negative activities.
There's been a lot of positive.
Absolutely. Any
I'll
other
move
questions?
it.
You second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is it's revocable permit for 646 Congress Street.
This is a new sign, however, not a new location. It's a new board on an existing storefront with an existing sign, new operator, so they need a new permit. The information is in your packet. It's like development is aware of it. It's a corner lot on Congress Street. So, really no.
Yes, of course. So is this the one opposite where the library is now?
6 and Congress, yes.
Congress.
This is Congress.
Right, not Crane.
Oh, not Crane.
No, no,
Oh,
Congress.
okay. Congress,
No,
Congress,
that's
Congress.
this one.
So I'm looking at the picture here and it's like, well, yeah, I'm thinking that's the store by
I
the.
can't figure out what that picture is, and I think that's,
That doesn't.
To the side of the building.
It's on a corner.
It's in the corner of 6th Avenue and Congress.
6th and Congress.
This one right here. This,
Somebody had replaced the windows and had started work in there and then.
Yeah.
right,
We've had some facade
stop.
improvements, the sidewalks have been, replaced. Existing post, you can see it in the picture there above the entranceway.
all right, any other questions?
These are
I'll move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Wallace. The next item on the agenda is the review regarding the adoption of the Historical Stockade District Comprehensive Streetscape Plan. We did have our public hearing on December 23rd, so I believe we can now call for a vote on this. Any questions?
Why is it listed as a review?
It's just
Usually that's
because
before the public hearing, right?
the public hearing already
Right,
happened on the
right,
23rd.
but I'm saying that.
So then the next meeting we have on Monday, you're gonna pass it.
You're
So
gonna
this
adopt
is your opportunity to discuss it further if you need to.
Right, I just thought the review was before the public hearing, that's what threw me off.
So moved. Okay,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the amendment to chapter 137 of the code of the city related to the parking garages. I believe we had the public hearing on the 23rd, and then we can move forward with this also. Any questions?
Oh, actually, yes. Did we set a fee for the permits and all that?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard any figures. I think there was a conversation, I think, that was gonna happen with code enforcement. I have not heard anything. We can certainly, I can check with, code enforcement. Mayor, I don't know if you've had a conversation with.
I haven't, I apologize, I didn't read everything in this.
I didn't either, I
But
forgot
what
to.
I would suggest to the council is where we've taken the fees as opposed to changing them in the local law, just incorporate in the
We already did
adoption of these changes for the parking garages, that those fees will be set by resolution.
Yeah, we already
Yep.
did that,
That we already
Okay,
did
if
that.
that's
We already
already
did that.
done, then
Right.
it doesn't
yeah.
matter on this, we just adopt this.
And then we set the fees.
And then we set the fee, and a subsequent resolution to
So
set the
it's
fees.
just one
Do that.
cycle.
You get a little bit, and there's probably a variance in that, because some of the projects are fairly simple and straightforward, and others may require more staff time and be more complicated. So the council may want to consider a variable rate structure depending on size of the structure or what is actually required of city staff and time.
Okay,
Very good.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think that's the last item on our agenda, if I'm not mistaken.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Call to order the Finance Committee. The first item on the agenda is discussion of council approval for contract acceptance or change orders of a certain amount. Mr. Mugavera.
Yeah, sometime back we had discussed this on to look at change orders and how we can, the council can be able to be more informed in terms of if there is change orders happening. But I had some very good conversation with law department and thought how we can move forward instead of us having all the change order come back to us and we're gonna be approving them. It doesn't make any sense. But just a matter of a notification if there's any change order so the council is aware of what is going on with these contracts. So I don't know if you want to highlight some of the discussion that we had.
Sure, thank you. I spoke with some department heads to understand the contracts that you know, that come out of their office. You know, obviously, transparency, particularly with the council, is important. One of the issues in having to go back to the council with certain change orders would be, what does that do? What's the practical effect? What does that do for completing a project? There's concern that if we went back to the council for certain change orders, that it would slow things down to a crawl and may make it more difficult, one, to complete the project in a timely fashion, and two, to even get certain contractors to submit bids, because they would be going into it knowing that they would not be able to finish, you know, not necessarily finish in a timely manner. So the suggestion that I spoke to Mr. Wallen, I spoke to Mr. LaFond about, had to do with transparency in terms of, once a change order occurs, notifying the council of the change order within a set amount of time. Now, obviously, there are certain change orders that happen on a relatively regular basis, but they're relatively small change orders. You know, it could be for $100 more or something like that. You know, we're not talking something substantial. But obviously, then we have our more substantial change orders. So my suggestion would be to, if the council wants to be informed within a certain amount of time, for it to be a change order related to the greater of a certain amount, or a particular amount, or percentage of the contract. You know, so for example, if it's a $500,000 contract, and you know, you can either look for a change order that is a certain amount, $50,000 for example, or a percentage of that contract. You know, we could say it could be 5%. In that case, it would be $25,000. So that's just something that, you know, I wanted to bring to your attention. Obviously, you know, it's the city council's decision in terms of, you know, how it wants to handle being notified and the amounts that for which it wants to be notified.
Are there any questions?
I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, just about notification rather than us, you know, not piecemealing it. It's gonna be a difficult task, and that don't want to affect the progress and the flow of work going on. But just a matter of a notification. I mean, I don't know the rest of the council.
Ms. Carrasco?
As it is, if I recall from our previous conversations, within the code, we get notification if it's 10% out of budget, but it surpasses budget by 10% right now. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that being the case.
I thought, didn't we have a conversation about that?
At a certain level, will come back to the council.
Right, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
It's just not notification, but
Right.
we have to.
But I'm
So-
saying, if it goes 10%, I think it was 10%, wasn't it? If I
That's
recall, or
and
15?
that actually applies to certain state contracts.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't apply for the purposes of the city council. This came up recently, and I know this is on the agenda, related to the sidewalk, where there's language in our contract which gives, the Corporation Counsel's Office deemed it necessary to include certain language, and this is language that's been in a lot of our contracts, all of our contracts, where we've given some flexibility to the particular departments to make changes so as not to slow down a project. But there hasn't been anything in the code or anything in the purchasing procurement policy which requires something to come back to the council unless for some reason that language wasn't in there. Okay?
Well, then it seems to me like notifications on small things make sense, but at some point we have to set some sort of a threshold or percentage on when it comes back to the council. Because right now it could be 100% change order and we wouldn't know.
Well, it still has to be within the budgeted amount, correct? You still have to stay within the budgeted amount.
Well, that's what I'm
so-
asking.
Right, we
Well,
still.
at what point does it come back to the council if it goes outside of the budgeted amount? Is
So,
there
so can
anything
I
in the
just give you
code?
if you don't mind? If there's a project that we have a budget of $100,000 for, and we have a bid that comes in for, you know, $70,000, but the budgeted amount is 100, and we take the 70, so the challenge there is what happens if that $70,000 comes back and gets up to the $100,000, because that's the budgeted amount. That's the gray area that we wanna make sure that the right, the individuals
I
are.
don't think that's right, I don't.
No, but I thought if you, the change orders would come in, and as long as it stayed underneath the budgeted amount, we wouldn't.
I'm saying within the bid amount,
Bid.
we should put some sort of stopgap measure.
Right now, there's nothing in that requires us to come back to you. As I said, the resolutions that the council has previously passed has included language which said that the Corporation Counsel's Office could include terms that we deem necessary. In the past, we've deemed necessary to include that language, as I mentioned, to allow certain departments to make, to essentially have the flexibility, to allow them to make changes, not in terms of not in terms of like the unit price for something, but in terms of the amount of work that is going to be done. So, for example, if the initial bid was for 10 trees to be removed, but we realized later on that it was actually 15 that had to be removed. And the price was, let's say, $2,000 to remove each tree. And we said, well, we want you to remove 15. We wouldn't increase the unit price for each removal, but we could increase the number of trees that are removed. That would not come back to the council.
Andrew, what's the state language on this 10%?
Certain state contracts, I believe it's 10%. I don't believe it's a hard and fast rule. I think it depends on the contract.
Could you-
Generally,
Oh,
yes,
sorry.
we can look into it, yes.
Could you get us and send it to the entire council some information as to state contracts? And my recommendation, we'll have further discussion, of course, but would be to be consistent perhaps with the state as far as how our contracts are written and some of the change orders. And that way, we're dealing probably with a lot of the same contractors to begin with, but at least the language would be consistent. Are there any other comments or questions?
No, I'm good with it.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, we're sticking with Mr. Colden, the purchasing policy of the city of Schenectady.
So every 2 years, the city council is tasked with approving an updated purchasing policy. So here we are, it's been 2 years. I believe everybody should have a copy of the previous purchasing policy. Certain things that I just want to bring to your attention that should be updated in the beginning part there, those individuals who are responsible for purchasing. I believe there are some folks who are no longer in those positions. I believe Mr. Eatman is no longer Deputy Commissioner of Finance. So I would suggest that he be stricken as, I'm not certain if there's anybody else that council was inclined to add. I don't believe we had anybody else to add in just discussing the policy.
Ms. Perazzo.
Does Mr. Eiden still act as acting mayor?
He is one of the people that has power of substitution to sign my name if I'm not here on an ongoing basis. If there's formal
Signing is-
time I'm out of town or something, then I will designate somebody in writing to act in that capacity. It has been him, but sometimes varies with the individual department head schedule. Usually goes to either the police chief or the fire chief.
Yeah.
So if there is an incident or event, they're best able to handle it by standing order. Senecal is an incident commander. It doesn't require any action on my part for him to just assume control.
Anything further? How would you like to proceed, Andrew? Mr. Colden?
As it relates to that,
Yes.
I would just remove Mr. Eatman, and
Okay.
I don't believe there's anybody else to add on or take off.
Ms. Porterfield?
Would it make sense to delete names and put titles there?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
So it's the finance commissioner, it's the commissioner of public safety, it's whoever may occupy those positions independent of an individual.
I agree with that, so you don't have to change this.
Are you hinting?
He's okay with that.
Yeah. Yes.
Porterfield, did you get your question answered?
No, I haven't answered yet.
Couldn't find it.
Number 3, for the public works construction contracts exceeding 200,000. There's been some conversation with, I'm not sure how far the conversation's gone with the affirmative action officer, that we consider raising this, and I don't know if
Yep.
if you want Mr.
Thank you for asking.
Okay.
We actually had a discussion today about it, and I will certainly, if the council's inclined to have Mr. Garner speak to it, to increasing it to $500,000.
Thank you for we had met this afternoon to talk about some proposals for the, looking at the entire affirmative action program and get consistent with the goals. Thank you. So our proposal is to look at revamping and adding to and enhancing.
We have to come on that side, sir, and then raise the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Our proposal is to look at enhancing and increasing the opportunity for our constituents in procurement opportunities within the city as it relates to contracts and professional services and other things alike. So our proposal deals with a couple of areas. One, dealing specifically with the increasing the apprenticeship cap and raising it from 200,000 to 500,000. And the reason being is there is a disparity here between smaller firms, not just minority women, but just small firms in general, have an opportunity to participate on some of these programs and projects, because if you don't have an apprenticeship program, the New York State Department of Labor apprenticeship program, you're excluded from bidding on these opportunities. So we're requesting that you consider raising that cap level from 200,000 to the 500,000. The other areas that we wanted to talk about was addressing the goals and the objectives of the program, where we wanted to increase our goals for minority and women-owned firms in these contracts and opportunities to be more in line with what we're doing at the state level, because the majority of all of the contracts and opportunities that we have here are up under the state guidelines, but we're a little behind in terms of keeping up with those. So to get some parity and some consistency there, we're actually to increase the MWBE and the MWBE goal up to 23% starting this year. And that would be a phase amount to be more in line with the state, which is currently at 30%. But we're not quite to capacity to that's why the big jump. But if we can look at things from the left, we have more of an opportunity to be successful. And also as part of the policy procedures, you can see in the documentation, we're looking at identifying and specifying specifically what we recognize as our geographical areas, so we'll be again more consistent with the state that calls the capital region. That includes the 10-county areas surrounding us here in Schenectady. So it gives us more of a pool to pull from, and also it gives us an opportunity to create more opportunities for our constituents here in Schenectady, in the county level, and also more of a base to pull and make things more successful for us. Also, I'd like for you to consider, while you're looking at it, is where I actually consider professional services, because that's another area that we typically have not addressed in the past. And I realize it's a challenge as we talk about that, but this past year, in October, we went to the New York State Embassy Forum, and we had a table for the first time, and we were able to present this to the city of Schenectady and talk about the opportunities here and that we are for business and more firms to come in. And we had a whole list of firms that came to us here locally. We use Schenectady, Rensselaer, that never had an opportunity, and a lot of these opportunities that we do a lot with architects, engineering, accounting, whatever, so there's a pool of firms out there, and that's just here in this particular footprint. When you look at that whole capital region footprint, there's a tremendous amount of resources there where we can also encourage our firms here locally to collaborate, and we have more opportunities to get
into those opportunities as we move forward. The other thing that makes this work is we have to be diligent to how we approach it and how we make sure that it works so we don't deal with all some of the challenges that we have now. The first thing that I'm asking is that we put in the language so that when a contractor submits a bid for the project, that they submit their utilization plans with it as part of the bid, just as you currently do with the apprentice improvement. In other words, if the contractor submits a bid and they don't submit the apprentice program, the bid is not being responsive. So I want to do the same thing when it comes to the utilization. That gives us some leverage and some teeth to want to do more experience. So they have a mechanism to address it if they don't comply. And the other part of it is having a language in the contract so that when they're non-compliant, that we are remedying that they're in violation of the contract, which makes the life easier for us to hold them in compliance and to do what they got to do. So there's a lot of work, to be done, and this is a good first step for us to start moving forward. It's aggressive, but it's something that we need to take an aggressive step on and move forward. And we want to truly create opportunities for our constituents, which is, one time, small businesses and our residents, and so that we can get people in the mode of having opportunity for, good wages.
Yeah, so, Ron, Mr. Gardner, I appreciate your comments. What you've just given us here, I think, is a lot of good information that truly I cannot really read and really dig into tonight.
I'm not looking to have council make a decision.
Oh, that's what I thought you were making us do, to make these changes.
There's gonna be discussion going back and forth on some of the.
Well, you mentioned that you want us to raise the limit to $500,000.
No, I wanted to have it discussed. That's what we're doing.
Okay, all right, and that I would agree with you down the road, and give us some more details on, I've got several questions which I will email to you regarding this. But are we able to pass this policy as is and come back to amend it? Because isn't it something that has to be out, Gary?
Not asking you to pass it tonight, this is for discussion.
Right.
Whether you bring it up in 2 weeks or 2 weeks after that, to be able to come to a consensus to adopt it.
Oh, I thought we had to have this in place by January 1st.
No, I mean,
The old policy stays in place for the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. And again, there's no fatal flaw in our current policy, but again, we have to just review it, update it, and move forward in a manner that's addressing the needs of the city and the community.
Yeah, that's,
All right,
yeah.
all right, well, that's good then, so we're gonna hold this then.
Yes.
For further discussion.
I thought at some point we had, and it wasn't my topic that I brought forward, but I thought we discussed having some additional framework around the professional services category also. Just right now, if it's a professional service, pretty much it's carte blanche as far as what can be spent. And I thought we talked about putting some guidelines around the hiring of professional services and what fell under professional services. Anybody else recall that?
Can't say that I
I will try to do some research on that.
Any other comments or questions? All right, so then.
Yeah,
Ms.
two
Porter.
questions. I just wanted to know what our moving forward, how this is going to look if, we'll be bringing it back in 2 weeks, discussing it until we finally get to the place where we are adopting it?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
And,
Mr. Coach.
yes, Mr. Chair, and if we can also have Mr. Gardner back in 2 weeks as well. Because again, I have quite a few, I can just email the entire council as well, or to you and to Mr. Gardner? How would you
Do
guys?
the entire council.
Just so we have, a lot of questions here. But yeah, we'll get Mr. Gardner back in 2 weeks as well. 2 weeks on Monday. Not on a Tuesday, that's fine.
13 days.
13 days, right. All right, thank you.
Ms. Porterfield.
So, are we gonna be then just emailing all of our questions forward so that when he comes back in 2 weeks?
He's got him.
Then he's had an opportunity to review them as opposed to answering.
Makes
things.
sense, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't make sense.
okay.
Well, it may not just be questions, if councilors have suggestions too, to
Right.
put those forward so that we can research and see if they're appropriately incorporated in the document.
Thank you.
Is there anything further? All right. 13 days.
13 days.
Next item is the sidewalk project for Ardsley. As we all know, there was a number of issues that resulted. Granted, it's a pilot project, so we are fleshing out some of the issues that need to get ironed out in order to move forward and have it be successful. One of the things that came up was with the pricing. Some of the things that were supposed to occur didn't for various reasons, and to try to get it back to where we're looking as far as a price point, because some of these things, such as letters going out, didn't occur. It's not right to pass that on to the residents. One of the suggestions, looking to make a motion perhaps tonight, is to approve taking out of the capital budget where we had the $1 million, taking roughly 37,500, 37,435 to be exact, and putting that towards the cost to reduce the cost to the residents that live on Ardsley, and make sure this doesn't happen again. So, Ms. Peraza.
Mr. Russell?
Miss
I just have a question.
Miss Zaluski Balzunas, sorry.
I personally feel it's a pilot program. I think it's the right thing to do. I think, we need to make it right with the residents on Ardsley. Quite frankly, the street looks absolutely beautiful. I had some great comments from some of the residents that live there. They're very happy. They are understanding that, there were trees and extenuating circumstances for all of this, but I think we will make our residents very happy if we can go back to what the estimated amount was, and I believe 37,500 is gonna, or whatever, 30,499 is going to be making those estimates the reality.
What's the, excuse me, the price per foot on that?
55.44.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's what we,
Mr. Coach.
So that's how we came to the numbers. We worked out the numbers of the original square footage that was built to us was $81.71 per foot. And when we tried, as we said, we talked about to get it down to that $2,700 mark, it comes out to a price of $55.44 per foot. And if you take that towards the average 50-foot frontage, that new amount would be $2,772 to a homeowner who had a 50-foot frontage. And as Mr. Palmetti, and I'm sure many of the council members say, this is the reason why we did it as a pilot project. I think it was very important that we did that, but again, there were a lot of things that we had to learn. Lack of setting out notices and following up on our end and doing what we had to do. But again, the project came out very well. And again, the $37,435 would come out of the $1 million that we had set aside in 2019 budget.
Correct.
For the sidewalk replacement program. So this would make, I think, our residents very, very happy. And again, as we move forward, we just have to work very closely with our contractors and with the engineering department and everybody else to making sure that these numbers come true for us in the future. So thank you for considering this.
Ms. Peraza.
I want to make sure I understand exactly what happened. So we did the sidewalk program, that came in within what we anticipated cost-wise, but the additional adding of the addition of curbs and removal of trees then raised the price, or did the contractor come in with the cement at a higher price? Can you explain to me exactly what happened and why the people were billed more than anticipated?
There was a conversion factor that.
John, can we have Ms. O'Ronning explain that?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Just because I've had questions.
Yeah, you could.
All I heard is we had a mistake.
So the issue that we're referring to that regarded the increase in cost is what ended up happening was we estimated in our quantity that 1 foot on each side for somebody's topsoil, things like that. We have a bust in that number, square yards and cubic yards divided by 9 by 27. We had that issue happen. In addition, as we were doing the excavation. We had on, I think, a little bit with this project, our rose-colored glasses in regards to everything was going to be what we thought by the book. And so we anticipated 6 inches coming out, 8 inches coming out of third base, and when we got all done, they took out more depth-wise, and not so much width-wise, but depth. And when we wanted to put it back, the tickets, the quantities of some base and what we had on the stuff as the soil, they just kept adding up. And so we weren't anticipating, like I said, we were thinking in our heads restoration. My junior engineering, we were working on, assistant engineer, we were working on it, but we were thinking restoration and really not depth. And when we added even 4 more inches of that sub-base material, which was like the topsoil, and you put it for the length, the number just went up. And, I'm working with Andrew now about how we can put into the purchasing policy certain things where we can, when we realize that, when we can renegotiate quantities similarly, so that when we realize that we have such a discrepancy that we can say, okay, hold on, let's maybe have a conversation about where it is, because a contractor, not for nothing, they bid the items, and we do hold to the items, and the contractor will look, and if they do see that they think we missed something, they will inflate the number a little bit. So this is where we did the pilot program, but it's still my responsibility to make sure we put something fair and equitable going forward. And I don't know, clearly as a once more, they had some flaws in that when we did it. We also were rushing to get it done by November 1st to make sure that this first iteration went in. And maybe in hindsight that was not the right thing, but at the same point, I think it is Mr. Rose who said that going forward, this is going forward, I think it's an admirable effort to keep track of, not to stop. I just want to do better. And so that's what we're going to do. The only question I've had going forward is there was a second award, so I don't want you as a council to forget that. We're not doing my project until April, but there was another camp, which was
Right,
Camp
right.
was, so originally when this went to council, we were talking 8171 about like the camp more order was 8352. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at both and then how we go going forward, because I can anticipate some questions if one is now X and one is now Y.
Well, certainly we'll
So
have to,
I just want to,
yeah.
that's going to happen in April. The other thing I think would be good is a policy. I like to think of myself as I execute the contracts and things like that. I never thought it was in my purview to contact residents with information. So some of those details of, if it is my responsibility, just let me know. That's not something that I was aware that I was going to do. So once again, moving forward, it would be good enough.
Yeah, it's certainly a pilot project has been discussed, and fleshing things out, making sure we don't make the same mistakes going forward, and certainly communication with key, and so we'll get that figured out as we move forward.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk on other subjects we do talk about, but I think some of these things that Ron's working on, raising the apprenticeship program, the 500,000, there's a lot of things that we can do hopefully to spur up. Because one of the things that you also know is we got one bidder who was kind of, and to go back out is another month, and we would have missed our window. It's perfectly normal, right to say we want to wait till we have several bidders to weigh the costs, but anything we can do to get more bidders. I mean, that was the reason that we bid the camp largely separate, was because the camp had urban asphalt, large street, largely with just sidewalks, but we still doing just sidewalks, we still only had the one bidder. So I think, raising it because it was right at that 200 threshold and we wanted it over, so that made it.
Ms. Porterfield, did you have?
Yeah.
Ms. Perazzo?
So in terms of the camp, what's been quoted to the residents, I mean, are we 100% what they're going to, without going into the city's budget, are we 100% that what they're going to be charged is what, I mean, have we given them that number, are we clear on that?
That number has only been given here.
Okay,
That number is in when we awarded the paving program for the fall, which Louisi Brothers has. That number has not been disseminated on a one-on-one account. It has not changed. One of the things that I will talk with Andrew about is that this is where it's a very slippery slope when the council starts interjecting with construction.
and change orders and how we go forward, because it's just, there's a lot that happens, all right, and there's a lot of things, so, so in this case, as of right now, DeCamp is gonna go flawlessly, and there will be no issues as per the bid. But if there is an issue and the costs fluctuate, that's where having this direction of, okay, we're going to, I don't know what the phrase would be, hold harmless, we said that this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do, and then we'll take it on, we've done that before. I think one thing I just wanted to say, because we were talking about it, I wanted to try to just give myself and Anthony a little bit of credit, is that when we do these things, we're working within the guidelines and the budgets and all of these things, and I want to just make sure that it's known that we, you know, we're trying hard to squeeze as much as we can to get all these projects done, and the costs are, they're frustrating sometimes, you know what I mean, and you're at that will, but I think that, you know, I do not work in a vacuum. I'm not up there, I work with the mayor, and I work with Andrew and Anthony, and we do, and we abide by the purchasing policies, and we work within our budgets, we're not, have some kind of, you know, area that we're doing, so it would be great if you're informed of things, but at the same point, I would also like that you trust that the managers that you have in place are also working in the city's best interest and abiding by the policies, and that you don't need to know every minutia of all the projects, because that will also take up a little time, because we're talking about reports. So, but in this case, I'd like to do better. I think that you know, this is my family street, the street I grew up on, and it's not my goal to upset my, you know, my neighbors.
Good to know that.
So I had two things. It's been long enough that I don't remember if the bid was all one package. Were the sidewalks separate on DeCamp, and would it behoove us to go out to, now knowing what we know, to go out to bid again for DeCamp? And just on a side note, I don't think anybody's pointing a finger at the engineering department. I think, as you said, it was a sense of rush that probably shouldn't have been there.
We could, I'd have to talk with Andrew about it just to see what the extent is, because it's a fairly large portion of the original bid. So it was a $1.7 million bid, which was smaller, but I think the camp was about $450,000 over 1.7. So I'd have to read the language and see about ads and deducts and what we can do.
Came in at 81, and DeCamp is 83. We're setting ourselves up for the same thing. And where my concern lies is, I certainly wouldn't disagree with using $37,000 out of that $1 million, because our residents ended up in a pickle and it wasn't their fault. However, going forward, practice can't continue, because the way this program is set up is that it's self-supporting and that it gets paid back over the course of a certain number of years. That $37,000 isn't going to be paid back because now it's on the city's dime. So as we're going forward, to keep this program as it was intended, we need to build costs to the residents as they are and not be making it up out of that $1 million. So just food for thought, because that money will not come back to the city, and that's not what the program intended.
John?
Mr. Mayor.
Chris, I haven't looked, have the potential for some of those same issues that occurred in the first round with that sub-base, where there may be more excavation?
Look, I don't believe, I don't really anticipate anything, because the project is much larger. The quantity's a little bit different, because we knew we were going down to take out the curbing. There was a lot more that we were excavating, or doing excavating and along. One of the things that I have to get out of the business is, you know, we're going to narrow down on the bit, because one of the things that happens when there's streets like that, the boulevard streets, is people are very used to, at this point, parking on the curb. When we put in our curb, on all of our curb, you really don't want to park on it, because it causes damage to your tires when it's new. And so we do try to move things in, and we do things in that manner. So we should be okay with this one, without being more aware of it. Just like I said, being a singular bid, honestly, it was really apparent. There was nowhere to hide any numbers, so to speak, to put everything was there. It was right where it was, which is fine. And I'll have to be just a little bit more vigilant with it going forward. But I think it's a good move. I don't want people to be discouraged going forward. We still have money left in the program. I think all my Curtis neighbors, other than getting the bill, like the project, they know the way it works with the street.
Alright, so I'd like to
Make a motion?
second.
Second.
Mr.
Second.
Mayor. All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you, guys.
Have a motion to adjourn.
No, I have one quick, it's a part of this actually. It's actually the resolutions from when this actually happened. And I see that, because I think it was under city development and planning. And so one of them has, Mrs. Zaluski-Wazunis, but the other two have my name. And I'm not clear why my name was on those resolutions, so that, it just doesn't make sense to me because it was never under my committee, so I just wanted to see if we can get that housekeeping done.
Oh, that your name is the resolution?
Yes.
I think she just draws names.
Yeah,
You
she
always
does.
No, I
draw-
don't think she just throws
That's
names.
how they do that.
I don't think she just throws names.
Alright, motion to adjourn.
Right, I see.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Call to order public safety. We have one item here for discussion. Alternate site parking from November 1st through April 1st for snow plowing purposes. Mr. Palomini.
So as we know, parking is an issue particularly during the winter months with snow. There's been a proposal to make alternate side parking. And we said we'd continue this discussion. One of the things that perhaps Mr. Mayor, you'd be able to provide is information on all the streets and the parking. That way we could take that into consideration with how to address the issue of parking. I think the alternate side parking is the best way to go, but I do know, for example, on some of the boulevard streets, there's 3 different sets of parking rules, and
And you're correct in that, where that may be what I'll call a solution for a good portion of the streets. There may be some sections where it's just not applicable, and so it's how do we go through and identify those? We have the other just bigger issue of the general signage in the city, where a lot of the signs have been up for a long time, so that they've deteriorated. Some have been removed because they were affixed to trees that have been taken down, or the actual street signs poles have been down. So it's going to be a big project to do the whole thing, but I think we should agree that we're going to do it, work through the variables and do the signage, do the modifications of the parking, and have something in place, you know, a year from now, or it might take 18 months, maybe 2 years by the time we go through the entire city, but to make that commitment, work it out, and make it happen.
Ms. Peraza.
Well, I
Oh, it's
think-
not my committee, sorry.
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think we also have some neighborhood outreach to do as well. I know that I had a good amount of feedback from, via email from people saying, not on my street, which you're always going to have, but I think it would behoove us to have some public forums. This is a big change for people. We want to first of all make sure people understand it, because if we don't have enough towing power and plow power to call a snow emergency, then this isn't going to solve it if people are uneducated as to how to handle it. And also hear their points on why they feel like their street should or should not have alternate stripes, side parking.
Just to be clear, it wouldn't be calling a snow emergency, it would be
Oh, I
alternate.
understand that.
Well,
My point is,
You
if we
said
don't have
please.
enough towing power to call a snow emergency and enough plowing power, and people don't understand how to utilize this properly, we're gonna be in the same position of having to tow people out of the way, which we say now that we don't have the ability to do. So I think the education component is crucial as we go forward with this, was my point. I understand that we haven't called a snow emergency in 8 years. But my point was, if we don't do this right, we're still not going to have the solution we need.
No,
Mr.
you're not-
Kalusha.
you're not the Mr. Mayor, believe it or not, I had 2 folks come up to me today on Glenwood Boulevard, by Oneida Middle School and going south, I guess, on Glenwood Boulevard. Apparently, we put up new signs there just last month that said no parking on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1 a.m. until 6 a.m. And I just found this out today, and there's nothing about it with the snow removal or anything. That's all it says, is no parking on this side, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 a.m. to 6 a.m.
I think that was set up for
So
street sweeping.
No. That's
But
what I'm
they
kinda
are
thinking.
old signs, that's the old configuration,
They were just put up.
but that was the old regulations. Those signs had come down, people were saying that the signs weren't up, so it, and again, I wasn't aware of the details of those going up, but it,
They just put them up, just right after Thanksgiving, they said, because they heard me talking about the sidewalk program, it was in Connerville, and they both reside on Glenwood Boulevard. And I said, where are you guys at? And they said towards the United Middle School, area. But you can check with John, I didn't get a chance to talk to any of you guys, I just found this out when I'm
so
leaving the building
maybe
at 4:30.
even the, PM hours would make more sense for.
Then and that's what they said, you
some
want
of
us to
the
come out at 1 o'clock in the morning.
parking there on the off street.
So, do you want me to send an email, or Alex, you can,
Well, if you wanna
Do
send
that.
the individuals, we'll contact them too and get back and,
well, it's a whole box, though, I mean, you got a lot of people at the top, but somebody, I'll just shoot you a quick reminder, all right? Thank you.
Mr. Palomini.
And the idea is not only just for snow removal, but honestly, the street sweeper too. As we all know, that's a big issue in the city, and making sure we have a comprehensive parking plan so the streets can get swept good, so.
May I just ask, so we will be continuing to discuss this, is that the
Yes.
deal?
yes.
Oh, ask you.
Yes.
So I read the materials, I think that Ed brought forward at the last committee meeting that had the samples from, Albany and I think, Binghamton. Okay, Rochester, and they definitely had, lots identified where if this was going to happen, then the residents would know that they could go park their cars in certain lots, so they'd have some advance notice, and be able to get off the street that way, but I just wanted to throw that out there, I thought that was a good,
And that's what Glenwood
A good
Boulevard,
idea.
folks, so where do you think we're gonna park? Because
I-
you can't park on the other side of Glenwood Boulevard, because that's all hammered up, it's tight parking. So I was very concerned, and I said, did anybody get tickets yet? And she said, not that they know of. So again, I will shoot an email and let them know that you guys will be contacting them. So thank you.
Any other discussions, so we can hold this or
Yeah.
bring it back in 2 weeks?
Hopefully get more and more
Get much more
information.
information out of it, okay. Any other business for public safety?
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
All right, call to order the government offices. One item on the agenda, ceremonial resolution for Reverend Phil Grigsby. Ms. Parada.
Yep, Reverend Grigsby is retiring. He certainly has a long career and has done an amazing amount of positive things for the city, and I just thought it was a career worth noting and celebrating, and just wanted to bring him in and give him some props.
So I'll make that motion.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anything else to come before government operations?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned, thank you.
Good evening, see you.
Are you?